All right, all set. Before we begin our program tonight, let's make space in our hearts for the people of Turkey and Syria. Let's pray that they continue to search, as they continue to search for survivors, that they will receive the resources and support they need to help unite their loved ones with their families. Good evening, everyone. I am Joyce Trotman Jordan. I'm on the board of Not in Our Town, and we'll begin with our land acknowledgement. The land on which we are living is part of the ancient homeland and traditional territory of the Lenni Lenape people. We pay respect to the Lenni Lenape people, past, present, and future, and their continuing presence in their homeland and in the diaspora. We also acknowledge the millions of enslaved Africans and their descendants on whose backs the wealth of this nation was created. Not in Our Town mission statement. Not in Our Town Princeton is a multiracial, multi-faith group of individuals who stand together for racial justice and inclusive communities. Our focus is to promote the equitable treatment of all and to uncover and confront white supremacy, the system that facilitates the preference, privilege, and power of white people at the expense of non-white people and pits racial and ethnic groups against each other by upholding the hierarchies based on proximity to whiteness. Our goal is to identify and expose the political, economical, and cultural systems which have enabled white supremacy to flourish and to create new structures and policies which will ensure equity and inclusion for all. In our commitment to uncovering the blight of white supremacy on our humanity, we take responsibility to address it and eliminate it in all its forms through intentional actions, starting with ourselves and our communities. Thank you. Take it away, Lynn.
Thank you, Joyce. I'm Linda Oppenheim, another board member of Not in Our Town Princeton. A number of years ago, pre-pandemic, Reverend Karen Johnston of the Unitarian Society in East Brunswick came to a Not in Our Town meeting to announce the reading of the names of the lost souls, African Americans who had been kidnapped in Middlesex County and sold south. Joyce Trotman Jordan and I, among others, attended the commemorative ceremony, an annual event you'll learn about shortly. Since then, it's been my goal to bring their story to Not in Our Town's continuing conversation. And tonight, we are fortunate to have a wonderful presenter to do just that. Kristal Langford is a doctoral candidate in the Education, Culture, and Society program of Rutgers University's Graduate School of Education and a lecturer in Black Studies and Psychology at William Patterson University. Her doctoral work examines how the increase in Black enrollment in New Jersey's public schools during the Great Migration led to the hegemony of whiteness in classroom practices, teaching, and training materials. As a member of the Revolution 250 New Jersey, a not-for-profit partner of the New Jersey Historical Commission, Kristal contributes her knowledge and expertise to the creation of an online repository of educational materials and resources for school districts and teachers, with a special emphasis on voices from historically marginalized and disenfranchised communities. She's featured in The Price of Silence, the PBS documentary about slavery in New Jersey, and co-authored the curriculum for the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project, which she joined in 2019. To tell you about the project and the people whose memories they seek to honor, For Not in Our Town's Black History Month program, I am proud and honored to introduce Kristal Langford.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Joyce, and thank you, everyone at the board and all the participants for joining me today. And I'm honored to be sharing our story. Obviously, this is definitely Black History Month, and Black History Month in its inception was actually created to celebrate, how far we have come as Black people, because as Linda shared with you in my background, my dissertation background, actually, I'm studying the Great Migration. And during that time period, it was intentional to omit the contributions of Black people in the history textbooks of the public schools. And the reason why they did so was to continue to perpetuate the stereotype or the notion that Blacks hadn't contributed actually to society in any way, shape, or form, and that we were at this, place of savagery. So we've resisted, and again, that's the Black History Week by Carter G. Woodson was again to celebrate for the students, actually to invite their families to come and celebrate what is it that we did. And tonight, that's another thing that we'll be doing. We'll be celebrating the resistance and the resilience of the lost souls. Yes, it is a story about slavery, but our goal for our organization is to really recognize the humanity of these individuals, these mothers, these fathers, these brothers, and also pay homage to those who fought against the system to ensure that these at least 137 individuals were seen as humans and treated as humans. So without further ado, I will begin my presentation. The title is Telling the Other Half, right? So dismissed agencies and overlooked histories. And the reason why I titled this is because typically when we're talking about history and Black history in particular, slavery, we kind of overlook, right, the ways in which we have fought back. Enslaved people have fought back against the conditions that they were placed in, right? And also the overlooked aspect of these histories is that we were always there, right? We've always been here. However, when the history tellers are telling the history, they kind of like overlook us, right? It's like not acknowledging that resistance and not acknowledging that agency that we had presented, again, to bend this moral arc, as Dr. King has said. So this presentation actually acknowledges and illuminates the hidden histories, and again, in this case, the overlooked histories and the dismissed agencies of freed and enslaved Blacks who were sold to the Deep South. And I actually want to highlight this idea of hidden histories, right? So I just mentioned this, what overlooked histories are, but definitely want to highlight this hidden history. So when we're talking about Van Wickle and the slave ring, right? So obviously it's a New Jersey story, which I'll get into shortly. However, his story has been hidden, and that's been typical of American history, period. Anything that's been unsavory, we swept under the rug. New Jersey is notorious for this in terms of our history and our role in the international slave trade, as well as the domestic slave trade, right? The interstate slave trade. We want to carry on this, not necessarily personality, we want to carry on this, this idea that we were progressive, we were a progressive state, and we were against slavery, but in reality, we were supporters of slavery, particularly the South. We were supporters of this institution of slavery. So the hidden history, again, is what we have done as a country, as a nation, as a state, when it comes to Van Wickle, as opposed to, again, going back to the overlooked histories, it's like we're not acknowledging how we have fought back for years and centuries. And so again, this story is about the Van Wickle slavery, but again, where our focus is on the at least 137 enslaved Blacks. And our conversation, again, because my background is really education, our conversation will really be looking at gatekeepers and who are gatekeepers. Gatekeepers to this history. And when I say gatekeepers are individuals who control the access to knowledge, control access to spaces, control access to information, right? So we're going to discuss this idea of the gatekeepers when it comes to this particular history as it relates to education, right? So although, I don't know the demographics of my audience members, however, we all contribute to the education system within our respective communities, be it Princeton, be it where I am in Somerset, even if it's, just our kids, our grandkids, we pay taxes. So what we definitely contribute. So that dictates, what our children learn, right? And then to think about that is what our children learn is going to have a direct impact on, how we move this nation forward, how we move this our state forward, how we move our communities forward. So when we get into the breakouts, one of the questions that I really want you to ponder is actually the second part of this, right? Once you finish learning about this story, what's next? Right? Because we hear these histories like, okay, well, then there's nothing else that we can do. But this story is like, okay, well, what is my role? Right? So, as hearers of this history, what do I do next? And I just mentioned this about the gatekeepers, right? So when we're talking about gatekeepers, again, we're talking about like systems of inequalities, right? That they are a part of, and they're difficult to change because of these individuals, right? So I want us to think about who are the gatekeepers in our communities, right? And again, case in point, we're looking at what's transpiring in Florida, right? We have Governor DeSantis, who just, put a block on AP African American history for, again, high performing students, right? Although this is not, about DeSantis, it can easily happen here. And I'm pretty sure it's happening within certain communities within the state of New Jersey in terms of what information our children are allowed to learn within the school systems. Again, these gatekeepers, going back to this idea of DeSantis, and him blocking this AP course for, again, high performing. And I'm emphasizing this idea of high performing because there we see an access being blocked as well, right? So this course is only made available to students who are high performing, right? So who are making those decisions that only students who are high performing have access to this information, right? So again, thinking about those gatekeepers. In addition to that, when we look at our education system, our students are only required to take 3 years of history. So geography, world history, and US history. So that fourth is an elective. So again, is there an incentive for them to take an African American history course? Not really, especially if it's offered in the 4th year, right? So again, this is actually taking place in New Jersey as well. And so some questions that I have for you on here. So again, for you to ponder, we don't necessarily have to get through all of them tonight, but for you to ponder even as you leave. And the last question is the one that it's a moral question in a sense. And this is for, definitely my white audience members and Black people who, who have subscribed to an ideology of white supremacy as well. So we'll be getting into this question in our breakout room. So definitely. But before I get to the story, I actually want to go into my positionality statement. This is something that I do every presentation so that you understand where I'm coming from. In addition to that, my bias, right? Because we all have biases. So yes, I am Black American of Haitian descent. Both my mother and father were born and raised in Haiti. I was born here in the United States. I am from a 2-parent household. My socioeconomic background, we are working poor. I am a middle child. Because of my Christian upbringing, politics was not discussed in the home. So a lot of this was new to me. I learned this once I got into college, and I attended public school. And the first point, right, me being Black American, and the last point are significant to this presentation, simply because I take honor in speaking against speaking up for my ancestors, speaking against injustice, only because them speaking out against what was happening to them was a death sentence, was potentially a death sentence. So therefore, again, I take honor in doing so. And also, to my last bullet points, the history that I teach, right, is not the history that I was taught, right? So again, going back to this whole idea of education. And so, and again, I got my education in public school, and again, I wasn't taught this history. And we're talking about local history here in New Jersey. So now I will begin the story of the lost souls and who were they, right? So the lost souls were, they're a conglomerate, obviously, of freed and enslaved Black folks, right? So the freed people here, we're looking for jobs. They're not only from New Jersey, actually, they're also from New York. So we have at least 11 of them who were freed, looking for work, and were promised employment in the South. We have our lost souls who come from throughout the United States, throughout New Jersey. We have some that came from Bridgewater. Matter of fact, Jane Wilson and her husband were from Bridgewater. We have some that came from Woodbridge. We have quite a few who came from Bergen County. Joseph Hendrickson, as you see, obviously came from this state. And Margaret Boss, again, Margaret Boss was an individual, a woman who was looking for work. She was freed, and I believe she came from Virginia. She was from Virginia, but she had to come up north because there was a law that was actually put in place. It's like, if you didn't seek employment, that they were going actually to re-enslave you. So she came up north to New York, but found herself in a pickle, being re-enslaved again in the South. The lost souls, again, we're talking about their humanity. They were individuals who had established roots in their communities, who lived, shared, and celebrate ordinary moments. So I want you to take a moment during this presentation and think about the moments that you celebrate with your family, right? How do you feel with the arrival of a birth of a child? Right? Your grandchild or even your own child, right? Celebrating that first birthday, celebrating them taking those first steps, right? Celebrating, a union. Obviously, they weren't allowed to get married, but they're celebrating was when they make a decision to find someone who they loved, right? And sneak to celebrate that, to get married or like illegally, but celebrating. So we celebrate those things. The things that we celebrate, they celebrated, right? And again, little things that we don't even think about, right? So I know when my young child was pushing his first tooth, I got excited, right? Those very little moments when those social smiles, or when they take their first steps. So the lost souls did these things. The enslaved people did these things. They celebrated these moments. And I want, when we're thinking about enslaved people, we're thinking about this aspect of humanity as well. So I also want you to think about how, them loving or them showing emotion actually was an act of resistance because they were not allowed to. They were not allowed to love. They were not allowed to cry, even as they were getting beat. They were not allowed to, even during family separations, they were not allowed to show these emotions. So when they did do so, again, it's an act of resistance. So, right, so these are natural human things, right? Again, I want you to think about the humanity aspect of this. The lost souls, they danced, they laughed, they cried, they dreamed, and they hoped. And this is what was stolen from them. Right? So again, think about us. We dream about when even our own children, right? So we dream about their future. Even when they don't go in the direction that we had hoped, right? We still dream for them. We still have hope for them. The lost souls did that, and we see that because it actually has been recorded. Their hopes and dreams and prayers and petitions of their ancestors who again prayed for the day that they would see their children freed, or even they themselves become free, was actually on the horizon with the Gradual Emancipation Act. The Gradual Emancipation Act of 1804 actually promised the children of enslaved women freedom if they're born July 4th, 1804. After that, so if they were a child, if they were a female child, Once they turned 21, they would be freed. And for a male child, once they turn 25, they would be freed. So although it's deferred, it's still a promise, right? So, and these parents, mothers and fathers, grandparents are holding on to this freedom. They're holding on to this hope. They're holding on to this promise. I just said this. So, you know, this promise actually, again, is a cause for celebration, right? So if they're, I mean, like, can you imagine those who were born before then, right? So again, although they weren't promised freedom, perhaps their sibling is going to be free. So they don't have to live this life of bondage that they, you know, have been destined according to United States law to live. However, this hope and this dream was stolen by a judge, Middlesex County judge by the name of Jacob Van Wickle, who conspired with his brother-in-law, who resided in, his brother-in-law, Charles Morgan, resided in Point Coupé, Louisiana. He had acquired a plantation there and he needed workers to till the land. So he actually came up to New Jersey. He was actually on his way to Virginia and decided to make a detour to New Jersey, and again conspired with Jacob Van Wickle to purchase as many enslaved people as possible. However way he can get them, he was going to get them. So the reason why he came up here, because in Louisiana, to purchase an enslaved person, you're looking at about $800, versus up here you're looking at a minimum of $150. So economically, it made sense for him to get a bang for his buck. So he did this. And what he did was, before he actually launched his plan, he actually tapped into his extensive network, family and political. So Charles Morgan of Louisiana was actually a state legislator as well, right? So, but Van Wickle, and they're coming from a Revolutionary War family, but Van Wickle also is well connected in the state of New Jersey. So what he did was he tapped other judges who conspired with him to tap into their own networks of individuals who had enslaved people to sell. And Judge Van Wickle actually used his home in South River, present day East Brunswick, and he used that actually as the courtroom, right, to falsify documents which you call certificates of removal, right? Because there is a law in 1812 that says in order for you to remove enslaved people out of the state of New Jersey, you actually need to secure their permission, a child and the adult. So again, he certified these documents saying that these individuals chose to go to a life of permanent servitude. However, we see a lot of resistance taking place here, right? We see mothers who, again, families, not even just mothers, not wanting to endure, right, this heart-wrenching event of family separation, right? So according to Van Wickle, they chose to go with their child. And to be honest, I can see how that's possible. Again, Van Wickle is, he's sneaky, right? He's conniving, right? Because obviously he's falsifying documents. But in some cases, we do see that in written documents that they did go to some places, and some mothers refuse, not necessarily to go with their children, but they refuse to have their children go, and they also refuse to go. But in some cases, obviously, if they're going to send their child down, the mom's like, I'm going as well. Again, not to endure that heart-wrenching event of separation anxiety. But the reality is, Charles Morgan knew that him sending those family units down, it was a possibility that they would be separated, even though he promised these families that they would remain intact. Give me a second. Again, so when we look at, we have a case here where we have Christine, who was 39 years old, and she has her two children. We actually have a lot of family units, young mothers with young children. Again, these children are promised freedom according to New Jersey law. And we have young mothers who, according to Van Wickle, decided to go with their children. holding on to that holding on to the hopes and dreams, right? So again, we have Christine, who's 39, and she has her young child, Diana, who's 9, and Dorcas, who's 1 year old. So of the lost souls, we do know of at least 42 of them were children. 42 of at least 137 were young children. The youngest of our human trafficking victims, because exactly what he was, baby Joseph, he was 2 days old. And when he departed, he was 10 days old. And again, because of the law, he was considered a slave for a term. So the law promised him freedom. The judge also collaborated with infamous kidnappers and slave catchers who engaged in kidnapping young boys and young men. So again, part of that law, the 1804, suggested that, well, actually not even suggested, it made it a requirement that enslavers teach these young kids to be apprentices, right? So you had individuals who became carpenters. So we do have a carpenter in our midst for the lost souls. So they would learn these trades, right? So these trades, obviously, they would use these individuals to hire them out, to bring them more money, but also the lost souls, these individuals would use these trades to generate money to even secure their own freedom and freedom of their family members. However, again, the judge collaborated with kidnappers to kidnap these individuals and sell them at a premium south. We also have freedom seekers like Claude. We don't call them runaways because seeking freedom or running away is, again, an act of resistance. So Claude, who was a freedom seeker, was stolen actually from the courts, from the Middlesex County courts, the jail actually, and brought to Van Wickle's home. And the reason why he was held there is because he was actually brought to Ohio and he ran away from his master, his enslaver, from Ohio. And then again, they brought him under guard in the courtroom. And then Van Wickle's, his people is actually, and then he's conspiring with individuals in the courtroom, in the jailhouse, to sneak Claus from the courtroom to Van Wickle and then ship Claus south on the first vessel, Marianne, bound for New Orleans. Van Wickle also, again, colluded with family members, and they would approach these individuals who are looking for work, who are desperate for employment. Again, it's like perhaps they're trying to save enough money to free their family members or purchase the time for their family members. But what he did was, again, he promised these individual freedoms and signed contracts, indentured servitude contracts for these individuals to go south. But according to the records, he actually did not honor his word, honor that contract. In fact, there was only one record of an individual whose contract was honored out of the 11. So again, he kidnapped them. And so we have these individuals here. So Suzanne Jackson, and more. Betsy Carpenter actually ran away twice. And according to this contract, if you run away, then you actually forfeit your pay. And they, according to Van Wickle, they were well aware of this. Same thing with Eliza Thomas. So they would run away, forfeit their pay, and pretty much be enslaved for the rest of their lives. So we have some other individuals here: Robert Cook, William McLean. And again, and though they were lied to, they were kidnapped and they were exploited, many, not just one, not just two, many of the lost souls actually resisted. Obviously, again, the mothers put their children first, right? So it didn't matter if it disrupted the dynamics of the former residents. I'm talking about economic dynamics, right? That how they would live in terms of like the reliance of this enslaved mother, right? These mothers didn't care. They wanted to be with their children. So again, that's a form of resistance. So them choosing to go, they weren't thinking about the economic ramifications. We also have evidence that as the men were being pushed in the belly of that vessel, that they actually pushed back. They moaned, they groaned, and they actually resisted. They were trying to bring attention to the port cutters, right, who was actually checking the manifest or checking to make sure that not Van Wickle, Charles Morgan wasn't smuggling individuals. So they were trying to draw attention, but they didn't succeed. So the smugglers actually, they won in that regards, in terms of like making sure that they weren't heard, but they did definitely resisted. And once they got to Louisiana, again, they made it clear that they were brought against their will. They verbally declared. You have women who said, "Hey, listen, we didn't agree to come down here to be, enslaved for life. We came actually down here to work." But obviously, the court systems, they are not going to honor the words of these Blacks who obviously are brought here against brought there to work, right? So Black was synonymous with slavery, so that was the law. And so again, we have them resisting, and we also see that they resisted in courts. We have many instances where mothers who used either their networks, right? So going by finding someone to write to their former enslaver to see the writing to the former enslaver to see what they can do. Because again, they're brought there against their will to say, "Hey, listen, we actually are re-enslaved," right? So we actually have an individual who was able to secure her freedom through those connections. And we have some who were unsuccessful in pleading their case in the courts of Louisiana. But this is another way that they're resisting, asserting their humanity, right? So they're seizing that moment, even if the court case wasn't about them, right? But they're letting the judicial systems of the parties in the judicial systems know that, hey, listen, we're not property. We are actually human. We are free people, and we were born free. So they're taking this moment to let it be known, even in correcting their name. Like, okay, well, no, my name is not Anne, is actually Savannah, or my name is not Savannah, is actually Hannah. So they're like letting them know, like, this is who I am. So again, asserting that humanity. So yeah, again, going back to that one case where she elicited the help of white sympathizers, right? This ally who actually brought the case to the Supreme Court in New York. And again, she secured her freedom. Her husband actually ran away, and he secured his freedom. And the law actually was on her side, so which was a great thing. However, but for the most part, most of the 137 enslaved folks, despite their petitions, despite their collective pleas, right, it fell on deaf ears, right? So a lot of them were enslaved. And our job in our organization is one to find their descendants and also find where they came from, to kind of like put that story together. So that's our goal. And again, educating the public about this local history. And although, we had obviously offices of individuals who held offices of public trust, right? They ignored these pleas, right? We as a community, right? And I'm happy that you guys are here, because you as a community because you guys are here, you're acknowledging that they have resisted, and we're acknowledging their humanity. We're recognizing that, and we want to continue to recognize that, right? Again, through educating the public about this story. Again, and this is just one story of many. And that is it. Thank you. I can't hear. I don't know if you're speaking, but I can't hear.
Thank you so much, Kristal.
Oh, you're welcome.
What was new for me in your presentation was the degree to which the people who were kidnapped resisted through these petitions, which I hadn't heard about before. Very, very important. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, you're welcome.
Before we go into the breakout rooms, I would like to read over our community agreements. Listen to each other respectfully. so that each person has an opportunity to be heard, take space, make space. People are encouraged to overcome their reluctance to talk. Take care not to dominate the conversation. Allow everyone to have equal airtime. Be careful not to interrupt when someone else is speaking. Please agree to respect one another's privacy by keeping this discussion and people's names and identities confidential. We ask that you embrace the concept whatever is said or shared in this room stays in this room. I'd like to add an addition, whatever is learned in this room, take out of the room and spread the word. Please speak from your own personal experience to avoid making generalizations. White people may feel uncomfortable when a person of color shares a hard truth. They should also understand that sharing these truths can be painful or even traumatic for the person of color. While we commit to centering these conversations through the lens of race, participants may experience these conversations through a variety of lenses. We acknowledge intersectionality, the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. And this is from the work of Kimberly Crenshaw. We make space for the breadth of human experience, and all are welcome. We were fortunate that Kristal did review the questions in advance, but I'd like to review them very briefly, and we can put them into the chat when you get into your breakout rooms. 1, how has learning about this morsel of New Jersey history challenged your thinking? What do you do with these narratives after learning them? 2, systems of inequalities and access to knowledge are difficult to change because of gatekeepers. Who are the gatekeepers of your community and of your education system? In what ways have we allowed or continue to allow gatekeepers to dictate the direction of our education and our children's education? 3, 2 decades ago, Black Studies scholar and sociologist George Lipsitz fueled discussion on race. In his text, The Possessive in Whiteness, he argued that racism was and still is more than a problem of pigment. It is a matter of attitudes, interest, and property. In other words, white people will not only find solace in white communities, but will go to great lengths to preserve and protect the sanctity of whiteness. If the anti-woke, anti-CRT crowd or anti-other curriculum sought to challenge a proposed inclusive curriculum in your all-white community, do you leave in search of an already established progressive community, or do you stay and resist? And why?
I think that's the first time we haven't been cut off in the middle of a really important sentence. We actually had a period before we came with.
Well, I'm glad you finished nicely, because I didn't.
Speak for yourself.
Thank you,
Very
Nancy.
rare. Very rare.
My feeling too, Joyce.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you to everyone for sticking around for the conversation, which is sort of the point. I'm Shelley Krause. I'm a member of the Not in Our Town leadership group, and I would very much like to hear from the rooms that I was not in. If friends are moved to share a sort of little nugget that you came away from your conversation with, so that we can all learn from each other, we would welcome your contributions. So feel free to unmute and speak up about the brilliance that was, I'm sure, in your group this evening.
Linda, go ahead.
I wanted to make sure that some information that we were very fortunate. We had 2 officers from Lost Souls in our group, as well as all the wonderful participants. And I'd like to ask Tony Hendricks and or Tony Armstead to tell us about when the next recitation of the names will be so that everybody can get it on their calendars for this year.
Actually just put it in the chat. So thank you, Linda. It will be on May 21st at 3 o'clock at the Community Arts Center in East Brunswick, but I will be providing to Linda a save the date flyer very, very soon. And just so that you also know, for those of you who were just in the breakout room with Tony Armstead, you know about her genealogy work. We will be presenting a special program on the 19th of this month in the library of the East Brunswick Public Library. They have us for every Black History Month on how to get involved, how to start your journey on learning your personal history. So thank you for giving us the opportunity again.
Thank you so much. How about it, breakout room brilliance? Or even just something that stood out for you. Sharon, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So in our group, we were with Connie and Wilma, and Connie pointed out that there's the supervisors of curriculum in elementary school and middle school, and I guess high school. And they are large gatekeepers on what gets taught. And I think a number of us, I for certain didn't know about curriculum supervisors in social studies and I think language arts in particular.
Just because Sharon actually shared a resource for getting a much fuller and more accurate history for students and all of us, and it's the Zinn project. And I found the link, and I just want to thank Sharon. But here's the link for it.
Thank you.
All right, I'll go. And in our group, what struck me most, and one of our participants also shared it, the resistance that people were willing to put forth, because we were all taught, at least I was taught, that enslaved people just were docile and just went along to, or were lazy and just, went along to keep the peace. But in fact, the resistance is what gives me the most hope in knowing that they were willing to fight for and resist that the cruelty that they were exposed to at the hands of their enslavers. So, and what the women were willing to do for their children was another fact. So, and then trying to get it in the schools, I really believe that one way of doing that is through community. And the more people that we can expose this project to, more young people who can put the pressure on their parents to put the pressure on the schools is one avenue. But we've got to get this information into the schools or into the community. So grassrootsy, bottom up.
Thanks, Auntie Joyce.
You're welcome, niece.
Let me just and one way we're actually getting this information in schools is through our screening for the Price of Silence. Actually, I'll be on a panel on the 15th. If you're available, I'll share the flyer with you as well. So it's through the Hopewell Valley, I believe, or Pennington school districts. So they're sharing that with their school audience as well. So I mean, because it's in film form, so it's easier for, I wouldn't say easier to digest necessarily, but it's helpful. At least you get a visual. So yeah, so we'll be doing these screenings throughout, hopefully, yeah, penetrating through school districts to begin telling the story. Definitely.
Thank you, Kristal. Yeah.
Anyone else have something that they'd like to share from their group?
Let me just jump in. Almost at the very end of the discussion, the concept of allyship was mentioned, and I just want to lift that up. We are all more effective in our work as we get into larger and more diverse communities, more broad ranging groups of people. So we can be in our town or in our school district, that's fine. But look for people beyond your own neighborhood, beyond your own kids' grade level, and so on and so forth, and build allies.
We definitely had a little bit of that element of the need to reach out to build coalitions, to build connections in our group as well. And to think broadly about who your partners might be. Well, friends, I want to thank you again for taking the time to be here this evening. And I especially want to thank Kristal for shining your light. It's been such a welcome opportunity, and I want to speak on behalf, I think, of a lot of us to say thank you so much for elevating and honoring the memories, the resistance and the resilience of these at least 137 human souls from whom we can learn so much. I really appreciate it. And on a kind of housekeeping note, to keep this energy going, I want to make note to friends that tomorrow evening, February 7th, we'll find Not in Our Town Princeton co-sponsoring another evening program, again on Zoom, this time in partnership with the Coalition for Peace Action. You can see that Linda has dropped a link in the chat. The program is called Addressing the Epidemic of Police Brutality, and it's featuring presenter Larry Ham, who is the longtime chair of the People's Organization for Progress, and who has been a leading New Jersey activist for justice and peace for over half a century. You can register online through peacecoalition.org for this, frustratingly, endlessly timely, always timely program. If more people register than they have capacity for in their Zoom room, they have said that they're going to admit people on a first come, first serve basis. So register and then show up a little early, because I think it's going to be a popular program. And then 1 month from tonight, of course, will be again the first Monday of the month. So it will be Monday, March 6th. For our next continuing conversation, we're welcoming Ms. Adriana Abizide. I'm not sure how she says her last name, but I'll find out next month, who will be speaking about her work at the Kensington Corridor Trust in a program entitled Access, Capitalism, Land, and Race, talking about the extent to which the real estate market is a white dominant market, and looking at ways in which predominantly Black and Brown communities are exploring and advancing models of ownership that combat capitalistic norms and prioritize investments of white folks, looking at some alternative ownership opportunities, lots of great opportunities for learning there as well. So once again, please take the energy that you've gained, we hope, from this program into your week, your month, your life. Resistance is joy, and we're very grateful to be here together to build on that energy. So thank you once again to everybody, and especially to Kristal.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
I want to thank Kim Dorman in the library too. Hooray for you
Yeah.
all.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Kim. Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye, Alvin.
Appreciate
Thank you,
guys.
baby.
Crystal.
Wonderful evening. Thank you. Everyone have a good evening.
You also. Thank you.